Welcome to US Daily Brief YouTube channel. The hesitant invasion of Ukraine undermined Moscow influence elsewhere. Russia has withdrawn an important air defense system and some of its troops from Syria to support the war in Ukraine. Moscow had to withdraw some troops and the Russian S-300 system from Syria last month. Russia has withdrawn about 1,200 to 1,600 troops from Syria. Russia, the dominant military force in Syria since 2015 and helping the Assad regime stay in power, still maintains a significant presence there. But this military retreat could herald a greater shift in the balance of power in one of the world's most difficult regions. While Russia's influence in Syria has decreased recently, the US's influence in this region has been increasing. At the same time, the USA draws attention by taking the side of Ukraine in the continuous war between Russia and Ukraine. In the first months of this year, about 20,000 US troops were mobilized in Central and Eastern Europe, first in anticipation of and then in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Many of these troops are still deployed in partner countries, training with local troops, and otherwise reassuring NATO countries that the United States will respond if Russia takes the war beyond Ukraine. Ever since Russian President Vladimir Putin began his full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the United States has sought to provide military aid to Kyiv without escalating this conflict. Ukraine is not a NATO member, and therefore, the US-led alliance is not directly involved in the war. President Joe Biden has repeatedly denied American troops fighting in Ukraine, despite the fact that the United States and its allies have provided equipment and training to the Kyiv forces. The military equipment aid provided by the United States to Ukraine was undoubtedly one of the factors in Ukraine's significant success against Russia. The United States has provided 5 packages of security assistance to Ukraine since the Russian invasion. As we approach the anniversary of the war, Ukrainian heroes continue to give the Russian army hard times. The United States could become an important ally for Ukraine, but also a threat to Russia. We stated that Russia has reduced its military presence in Syria for the Ukraine war. Russia, which has reduced its forces in Syria in order to resist and fight against Ukraine, is faced with a series of dangers. US soldiers began to be seen near the Russian airbase in Syria. American armored vehicles were spotted on the outskirts of Kamishli, not far from the airbase of the Russian aerospace forces. Against the background of the destabilization of the situation in northern Syria, the forces in Syria again signed an agreement with the United States on their protection. The situation is more than dangerous as US troops are now very close to the Russian army and Russian military installations. It was learned that the day before, the US army started patrolling with the Kurdish formations of the Syrian Democratic Forces. The patrol of the northern part of Syria by US armored vehicles was recorded for the 3rd day in a row. At the same time, American troops, accompanied by the Syrian Democratic Forces, managed to enter the outskirts of the city of Kamishli. While the US dominance in Syria is increasing its influence day by day, the Kremlin is aware of the situation and is uneasy. Russia said the United States supports separatist elements in Syria. A spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry described the US military presence as the main obstacle to reconciliation between Syrian Kurds and the government. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said that the US supports the separatist sentiments of some leaders of the Syrian Kurds and clearly follows a line to separate these regions from the rest of the country. Zakharova referred to the YPG, the Syrian branch of the international terrorist organization PKK. Speaking at a press conference in Moscow, Zakharova described the illegal military presence of the United States as the main obstacle to reconciliation between Syria's self-governing northeast region and her government. The main obstacle is still the illegal US military presence, the spokesperson said. The Americans support the separatist sentiments of some of the leaders of the Syrian Kurds and are clearly following a line for the separation of these areas from Damascus, he said. It is worth mentioning that the occupied territories are rich in oil and other natural resources. Let us now take a detailed look at the US activities in Syria. The US and SDF stopped all joint operations against ISIS amid the Turkish bombing. Washington's Kurdish allies in Syria have publicly pleaded with the United States to rein in its NATO ally as fears of invasion mount. The Syrian Democratic Forces, a predominantly Kurdish US-backed militia, announced on Friday that it has halted all joint counter-terrorism operations with the US against the Islamic State group as a result of Turkey's attack on its territory. The move was confirmed by the US military in a statement that said US forces in the region had halted all joint operations against the Islamic State group in Syria. Turkey already controls large areas of northern Syria, which it occupies in an attempt to prevent conflicts on its border. Ankara has been conducting artillery and air operations in the area for weeks, and Turkish officials have warned that a ground attack could be imminent. The areas of Syria that Turkey says it will target do not contain US troops and fall within Russia's sphere of influence in the northwest of the country. Washington is also courting Ankara to keep NATO together on the war in Ukraine. US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told his Turkish counterpart on Wednesday that Washington strongly opposed the new Turkish military operation in Syria. White House spokesman John Kirby reaffirmed the US stance on Friday. "We don't want to see anything that would affect our ability to continue to pressure ISIS and our ability to influence our partnership with the SDF. Turkish military actions have made the SDF less willing to continue contributing to operations against ISIS. The United States has backed the SDF with military aid and is conducting joint operations with the group it sees as the most effective fighting force against ISIS. The United States is subtly sending threats to Russia, siding with the forces in Syria. The breath of the United States, which circulates near Russia's airbase in Syria, does not leave Putin's neck alone for a moment. The war between Ukraine and Russia is almost a gift for the United States. The United States is strengthening its position in Syria, taking advantage of the effects of this war. Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues to be a great boon to the United States. Washington is making unprecedented geostrategic, economic, military, and political gains without killing a single soldier or firing a single bullet. However, the US is not content with geopolitical gains. He also wants to win in trade, and in this way, he stands out with the Ukraine war, which is a real blessing. International tensions created by the war increased arms sales worldwide. And where do we buy these guns? Of course, from the USA. Washington has promised billions of dollars in military aid to Ukraine, but there is no doubt that the Americans will get the lion's share through arms contracts. American weapons will also be supplied in abundance to other US customers, and buyers are already in line. In aviation, major contracts were announced shortly after the invasion of Russia, one of which provided for the purchase of up to 35 F-35A aircraft by Germany, potentially worth more than $8 billion. Canada also plans to purchase 88 F-35s at a cost of approximately $15 billion, while Finland announced late last year that it had ordered 64 aircraft at a cost of approximately $10 billion. At the same time, a real frenzy of purchases of weapons of all kinds swept through many European countries. Germany announced that it has created a special fund of $100 billion to renew its army. This will undoubtedly increase the purchase of weapons and equipment. US arm manufacturers are already waiting for orders. As we approach the anniversary of the war, for now, Ukraine is receiving life support from Western countries. However, it remains unclear when the war will end and how long this support will last. Thank you for watching us.